Hey YouTube, welcome back. We are doing our bots weapons Helldive tier list now for 4-player co-op. We're going to go through all the weapons, secondaries, and grenades in this video. Let's get into it. Starting off with the Incendiary Breaker, I think it's a solid weapon for bots. Unironically, I've definitely taken it a couple times, you know, after accidentally swapping from like bugs to bots immediately and not realizing what weapon I had. Used it out through the whole mission, and it actually does fairly good. Better than you would expect in a lot of situations, especially now that there's a lot more tier 1 bots I'm noticing on the field. I think that's maybe some of the spawn changes they mentioned, like less Hulks, but I think we're getting more tier 1 bots to compensate. Incendiary Breaker is really strong against tier 1 bots. It only takes one pellet, lighting them on fire, and they just fall over. So if tier 1 bots annoy the hell out of you and you just want to do like consistent damage over time, it's a fairly good weapon. It makes me want to put it like B+, A- tier. Definitely wouldn't like, you know, recommend it all the time because it's definitely not like a long range Devastator killer unless you're applying the fire like 3-4 times for them to die to it. But it's fairly good up close. You can kill Devastators fairly quickly, and tier 1 bots, like I said, just kind of fall over. So I think for now, we're just going to put in B+. It's fairly good for bots. I don't think it's like troll by any stretch of imagination, but yeah, I would check it out. Spray and Pray would be down in that like needs a buff. I put Breaker Spray and Pray down and needs a buff. It technically is a C tier, but it needs a buff. It needs to do something more unique than the Incendiary Breaker. It does less damage than the Incendiary Breaker, has worse handling than the Incendiary Breaker, has the same magazine size. Yes, it is 2 additional magazines, but when every individual shot is doing less damage and you don't have the fire component, what the hell is the point of it? They need to do something to it. Please, Arrowhead. I'm asking, I'm begging. Just give it something, please. Regular Breaker, probably like a B- kind of pickup. At least it does a lot of damage per second, but the ammo economy is definitely suffering. The Incendiary Breaker is doing pretty comparable damage per shot. Although the Breaker has more damage per shot individually, I would probably bring the Incendiary Breaker more often than the regular Breaker. Just for general ad clear and everything. So probably B-, C+ for the regular Breaker. Wouldn't recommend, but it's okay. Slugger, A- pickup. I'm putting it in A- and not any higher, mostly because it's a pretty high skill weapon. On bots, you need to hit your shots, like one-tapping Devastators in the face and so on and so forth. You don't have the stagger you used to have, so if you miss a shot, they're not being staggered until you get another shot off. I still hope that they give back at least some amount of the stagger it originally had. Maybe not all of it, because that's maybe the Punisher's role, is to be the stagger king of at least the pump shotguns. But I hope it gets some, so it makes it a little bit easier and more lenient to use against Devastators. I still really enjoy using it versus bots because it's very satisfying to be hitting those shots back to back, and it does is respectable amount of damage, and it's medium pen. We all know that medium pen and explosive damage are king when it comes to bot missions, and if you don't have either, the weapon definitely suffers. So Blitzer is somewhere better than the Breaker, but is still not a highly recommended weapon. You can make it work at times, especially if you're bringing some kind of support weapon that is more or less your longer range primary weapon, and then you swap to the Blitzer if you need something to deal with like berserkers or tier 1 enemies, or maybe staggering a Devastator that's within that 20-25 meter range. But the Blitzer is very bad at killing heavy Devastators from time to time, and although it has a ton of stagger, it's somewhat inaccurate in the way it does the damage, right? It's not as good versus bugs because you have to close that distance and so on and so forth. You know, there are definitely times where I feel like I'd rather use the Breaker than the Blitzer, but you know, it's probably in the B- B tier of weapons. Punisher coming up next would be the A tier. I do really enjoy bringing the Punisher. It's just a solid weapon, very similar to the bugs, where although it's not super accurate, it has enough punch that 1 to 2 shots near the faceplate of a Devastator will break the faceplate of the Devastator and they will instantly die. Also, it has a crazy amount of stagger, so at least if one pellet lands in a good spot, they stagger, which is fantastic. Highly recommend if you just are looking for a weapon that has a ton of stagger and like you don't want to be accurate with it. It's really strong. Another weapon that kind of goes into that kind of territory with less stagger is a Scorcher. But the Scorcher is fantastic because it has explosive damage, and explosive damage does amazing work against radiators and any squishy bits on like a Hulk's radiator, for instance, or a tank's radiator. Really good. Highly recommend. Doesn't quite have the medium pen necessary to deal with like some of the other things like pen, you know, other areas around a Devastator, or, you know, take out the guns of a Gatling, of a Factory Strider, but still incredibly powerful. Bring it with like some kind of support weapon that covers that medium pen niche, and the Scorcher is a fantastic primary to bring. Going into a little bit of a controversial one. This one is kind of like all over the place, I find, on the internet and just like in general in people's opinions. I lean more towards it's a bot weapon with a fairly slow charge up, which makes it more of a slow and methodical playstyle. You're not going to be playing aggressive with the Purifier, but it does have explosive damage. It does have medium pen damage and a lot of stagger. It checks a lot of boxes as far as like if this was in a weapon that didn't have a, if it didn't have a charge up, it would be S tier, like absolutely even better than the Scorcher. But because it has a charge up, it makes it harder to use. But I don't think that necessarily makes it bad. It's just hard to use. And I think in the right player's hand, it's very powerful. I put it around A minus in my last tier list. I put it around A minus, B plus. I'm still going to keep it around A minus A because it now actually has the medium pen. We've tested it. It actually does have it, which is nice. And it decreases the amount of shots necessary on a lot of targets. You can take out the Gatling sentries underneath a Factory Strider. I do enjoy using the weapon from time to time. But if you're playing more aggressive, like I like to play aggressive, you're not going to bring the Purifier. It just has too long of a charge up. I do hope they revisit the weapon and give it a little bit faster charge up. I think it would elevate it to a more usable state. And I don't think it would necessarily make it outright overpowered. It would just make it more usable and less clunky feeling. Because I definitely see that word floating around a lot when people describe it. Next, going into the Scythe. The Scythe is in an okay position at the moment. I want to put it ahead of the Breaker and around the Blitzer. It's probably like a middle B weapon, but I can't really give it a glowing recommendation until it gets a better scope. Because it only has a red dot, and because it requires so much accuracy in order to kill the vast majority of enemies, light pen by the way, it hurts it. It hurts it a lot. If it had a better scope like the Sickle, I think you would probably see the Sickle and the Scythe being like interchangeable. The Scythe having like next to no recoil and having no bullet travel time, which is really nice, but the Sickle having maybe more fire time, but it has bullet travel time. So, you know, they could like interchange one another if they had similar scopes. But the red dot on the Scythe really is counterintuitive. You need to be very precise with laser weapons, but yet you can't be. So hopefully they give it a better magnification in the future. Plasma Punisher, I would put A tier, solid weapon. Its only drawback, and the only reason I can't put it in S tier, is that it lacks range. I'm sure there's some insane gamers out there that are extremely good at using it at long distance, but for most people, you're going to struggle at using it more than like 30, 40 meters before you're starting to arc it to the point where you're not very accurate with it. I love using it though. It's a ton of fun. You bully enemies with it. Doesn't have the medium pen of the Purifier, but its outright damage per second, because you don't have any charge time with it, is fantastic for dealing with those Devastator swarms that are just messing you up. And they stagger like crazy, so you know you're bullying them. Sickle is a solid A tier weapon. I really enjoy using it, but it requires a great deal of accuracy, as I said earlier. If you are someone that likes bringing your autocannon and you're using your autocannon most of the time, but you want to fall back on a weapon that has basically unlimited ammo, and you have a good, you have good aim and you like using that scope, it's great. You can kill Devastators very easily with lack of recoil and just decent damage, great ammo economy. I do recommend, but it takes a certain type of person to enjoy it. Not everybody's going to enjoy the fact that you have to be so precise to take out a Devastator. So, yeah. Eruptor, solid A tier still. I would probably put it a little bit closer to A+. Now with the buff, you can very reliably 2-tap Devastators now, especially if you're doing the reload cancel, like I've been talking about before, or the animation cancel, however you want to call it. Opening up the stratagem window for about a second, and then firing again, and you can increase the fire rate by about 50% doing that tactic. I do like bringing the Eruptor when I'm bringing like the AMR, for instance. I'm mostly using the AMR to kill most things, but if I ever need to kill a Fabricator or I need to kill a Devastator, this is my go-to. Many people will say, why don't you just bring a grenade pistol? The grenade pistol kind of has a certain range limit at how accurate you can be versus a Fabricator. I think my record at killing a Fabricator is like 60, 70 meters before it's so hard. But with the Eruptor, you have a max range of about 150 to kill a Fabricator, and it's a lot easier because you're mostly just aiming right at it. So that's my main reasoning behind it. Crossbow, I'm going to put mostly closer to like, I would say like A-. I have a harder time enjoying the crossbow in bot missions as in bug missions. The AoE is nice, the medium pen is nice, but I'm seeing like an average of like 3 to 4 shots to kill a Devastator, and it at times kind of feels on par with the Purifier as far as like killing ability, but just has less stagger and like even a slower fire rate because you're reloading so often with the explosive crossbow. So the explosive crossbow at least has the benefit of dealing with Fabricators, but overall its ammo economy and like DPS is lower than the Purifier because you're reloading so often. I do enjoy bringing the crossbow if you're like going to bring it with a weapon like the HMG or laser cannon AMR. It pairs well, but I would probably be using the Eruptor more often unless they fix the animation cancel, which if they did, the crossbow all of a sudden goes higher and the Eruptor goes lower. But you know, keep that in mind. Diligence counter sniper, very solid option. I put that like in the A+ area. If you are someone who enjoys precision gameplay and one-tapping Devastators at like 100 meters, this is your go-to. It's a baby AMR. Really enjoy using it. It's tons of fun, decent ammo economy. It's medium pen, so you're at least able to deal with a lot of the tank's radiators. It takes a lot of shots, but it can deal with a laser turret or a tank in a pinch. So, yeah, highly recommend. Its counter, though, to the counter sniper, pun intended, is the Dominator. The Dominator is essentially a DMR with less accuracy, but so much more damage, almost triple the amount of damage at times. Medium pen, you already know, it's fantastic versus Devastators. 2-tap to the leg of a Devastator or 1-tap to the faceplate. It's like 5 to 6 to the body. So yeah, definitely recommend going for the faceplate or aiming at the 2-leg shot. It's just fantastic. Really good at taking out tanks, good at killing hulks from behind and in the heatsink. 1-taps regular enemies. I don't think much more has to be said. It is in many respects the best bot weapon if you don't enjoy the ease of use of the Scorcher, or maybe you don't like the handling of the Dominator. Hopefully one day they fix the new armor so it actually helps us with handling. I could see a lot of people using the new armor and the Dominator just to make it snappier. It would make a lot of sense. The standard Diligence, I think, is a B tier pick. Really good. 2 taps to a Devastator's head. And like really strong starter weapon for bots, but it does just get countered by the counter sniper. There's really no reason to go back to the Diligence if the counter sniper exists, unless they gave the Diligence a little bit more damage. If I remember correctly, the Diligence is like so close to 1-tapping a Devastator in the head. And with the newly discovered like dive forward or move forward strategy of shooting a Devastator, it's been theorized that with enough forward momentum, you can actually kill a Devastator in one shot. I haven't been able to recreate it with the Diligence, but I have been able to do it with the Verdict. But yeah, if they gave the Diligence another little bump in damage, you know, it would go into that A tier because it would start 1-tapping Devastators, which would be pretty cool. But it's light pen, so it's not dealing with tanks or laser cannon turret radiators, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. Pummeler. Pummeler is easily your go-to like one-handed weapon. It's just great if you are someone that likes using the ballistic shield, even with the problems the ballistic shield has in this patch. I highly recommend. Luna, come here. Chat, Luna's going she's asking. I'm back, and we just have Luna. She was crying. She wanted attention, and I think she wanted to be part of the video. Yeah, as far as the Pummeler goes, I really enjoy it with the ballistic shield, or just like in general, just staggering with the light pen weapon is very nice. It's got a lot of support in that regard. I would recommend, if you're looking for a one-handed weapon to pair with either just an objective that is, you know, tied with the SSD, or just in general with the ballistic shield. Next, going into the Defender, it's still in a decent spot, but it's kind of just gotten power crept by the Pummeler. I would much rather lose the 5 damage per shot and have that amount of stagger than use the Defender and, yeah, just have a little bit more damage. I don't think that extra bit of damage really pays for itself. I hope that maybe in the future they give it a little bit more damage to differentiate the Pummeler and the Defender. But at the moment, like, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't just use the Pummeler. It's just better. Going into the night, it's our first C tier pick other than this Breaker Spread and Pray. It needs more ammo per shot. I am not quite sure what they're going to do with it. I understand that it's only obtainable through the Super Citizen Edition, and I know that people would call the game maybe more pay to win, or pay to win in general, if the Knight was some like all-star. I just hope they at least fix the ammo economy. You don't have to make it much better. It is okay for bot missions if you put it in burst fire. You can be fairly accurate in 3-round burst, but its ammo economy really hurts it. For those who don't know, the drop down resupply only gives it half, and a ground brick only gives it a quarter ammo, which just makes it abysmal. So it's really hard to use in those situations. Hopefully in the future they can like come back to it and give it at least the ammo fix. Tenderizer is going to go right up there into A tier. It's a solid pick. I would probably put the Sickle above it just because it has a better ammo economy, but the Tenderizer has been a lot of fun in bot weapons or bot missions, and I don't really notice the ammo being as much a concern as in bug missions. If you watch the bug weapon tier list, I was constantly talking about how it felt like it didn't have enough ammo. All ARs just need at least 2 more magazines in bug missions, but in bot missions, I don't notice it nearly as much, just because it's a light pen weapon, you're going to be tap firing to kill Devastators. And for like the tier 1 bots, you're mostly 1 to 2 tapping them. So you can just be so ammo efficient per magazine. I do like it though. With the most recent patch, aim for where the green dot is pointing, not where the crosshair is. It seems to be slightly out of alignment. So definitely go for where the green dot is on it, or aim a little bit lower, or sorry, a little bit higher of where the crosshair is. It's a bit weird. Definitely need to look more into that, but I thought they were trying to fix some of the misalignment scopes, not add a little bit, because I didn't notice that before this most recent patch. The Tenderizer didn't seem like it was misaligned, other than the sight over bore, or I always forget the term, but essentially because the barrel is above the sight, there will always be some deviation between the two at a certain distance, then eventually they align. But this seems to be like the sight is ranged or like zeroed for the wrong distance or something, and it's compensating for like bullet drop. I'm not sure. Not sure at all. But yeah, Tenderizer, really strong, tap fire, good against Devastators, light pens, so it's not going to be super useful against everything, but it's a solid pickup. The Adjudicator is another good choice for bot missions. I like it being medium pen, and honestly, at times, I like it more than the Tenderizer. Just because it's medium pen, I feel like I don't have to worry as much about being pinpoint accurate. And the fact that the Adjudicator is medium pen, I can actually do something against a tank's radiator. I can do something against a laser turret. The ammo economies are very similar. also, which is nice. And the Adjudicator doesn't seem to kick as bad. You definitely want to be burst firing it or tap firing it, though. You're not going to be using it like the Tenderizer where you kind of full auto spray it. But if you crouch, you can easily spray out the leg of like a Rocket Devastator in like 5 to 7 shots, which is really nice. I would recommend. Liberator Penetrator, I'm going to put somewhere in like the B minus tier. It just doesn't do enough damage and just gets power crept by the Adjudicator. I don't see myself ever wanting to really use the Liberator if the Adjudicator exists in its current form. I want the Liberator Penetrator to basically be what the Tenderizer is, but in medium form. So what I mean by that is I want the Liberator Penetrator to do more damage, but to be like the accurate medium weapon, whereas the heavier hitting medium weapon is the Adjudicator. So maybe giving the Liberator Penetrator like 60, 65 damage. I think if you go any higher than that, the Adjudicator kind of gets power crept, or at least, you know, depending on the reload speed. Going to Liberator Concussive, we have another C tier B minus. The Liberator Concussive really suffers just from like a lack of damage per shot. At least it can stagger, which is nice. But let's be honest, there's so many good staggering weapons up here that, like, what's the point of Liberator Concussive? At least the Pummeler is the one-handed weapon, so it's got that niche going for it. But even still, the Pummeler is the better, like, weapon if you want something to stun lock. Liberator Concussive is maybe considered a B minus because you can be fairly accurate with it and tap some Devastator heads, and while you're tapping the Devastator head, you're stun locking them, which is fair, but you have to tap them at least like 3 times. I'm not a huge fan of the damage on it. If it did maybe more damage while also being concussive and light pen, maybe we're talking about something there, but not yet. Not yet. It still needs more. Still needs more damage. Normal Liberator, I'm going to put just behind the Liberator Penetrator. It's a solid weapon, but you're mostly wanting to aim at precision points, and why would you use the Liberator when you have the Tenderizer at this point? At least for bot missions, you want something more accurate. You want something with more damage. The Tenderizer also has more staggers, so I'm just going to be using the Tenderizer. It's solid. Liberator is a good starting weapon, but it kind of just gets left in the dust compared to other weapons around it, and I would honestly even use the Liberator Penetrator over it because it's medium pen, so at least got that. Liberator Carbine. Funny enough, I'm feeling really sorry for it, but I don't think it was ever gonna be a bot weapon unless they somehow gave it so much ammo or made it super accurate or somehow made it medium pen, because higher rate of fire light pen weapons are just never going to be great against bots, right? Unless they just add hordes of tier 1 bots in front of us, which even still, why don't you just use the Incendiary Breaker at that point? But like the Liberator Carbine just lacks ammo. It has too much recoil. It's nice that it's like basically the same as the Liberator, but I would rather use the Liberator because it's more accurate, less recoil. So Liberator Carbine is honestly maybe even lower depending on the person, but I do think at least it deserves to be somewhat close to Liberator because you can just tap fire it, and when you really do need, you know, that full rate of fire, it is there if you need it versus a Berserker or something, right? Going in with the Dagger, I'm gonna put the Dagger probably like B minus. I think it's okay, and I'm mostly just putting it because it has a limited ammo or the potential of a limited ammo, but the fire time on it is rather bad. The DPS on it is okay. It's rather good. If you are incredibly accurate with it, you can do decent work with it, but I do think it's laughable the amount of damage it will do sometimes and how much accuracy it requires in order to do decent damage. Like for tier 1 bots, you absolutely want to hit the head or else you're like trading damage. It doesn't have much range because it's a sidearm, and it doesn't really have any stagger because it's a laser weapon, so you have to be really precise. Even against the enemies, you would think it would just trounce. It is not as good as its other weapons in other categories. Peacemaker is another one of those, which is, I think, is in a little bit of an awkward position where it just it's just a worse version of the Redeemer. Even though it does more damage per shot, the Redeemer has more damage potential. It has a better fire rate, and even with the recoil increase of the Redeemer, I would pick that even in single fire versus the Peacemaker, which I do sometimes. I put the Redeemer into single fire, and I just tap the Devastator's heads or tap tier 1 bots, and it's rather proficient. It's to the point where, like, yeah, I just much rather take the Redeemer. And then, like, the Peacemaker needs, like, at least, 25 more damage or something. Maybe it'd be stepping on the toes of the Verdict, but it still needs more to be more effective. Or at least more ammo and reserves. That would help too. Redeemer, solid A tier pick. Sidearm, really enjoy it. It's definitely not going to get used as much now that we have so many other options, including the grenade pistol and bushwhacker and Verdict. Or the Senator now that has a speed loader. But it is still a fantastic sidearm if you need to mag dump or just have a lot of individual shots, right? It's 4 backup magazines, 30 rounds per. That's a lot of enemies you can kill with that. And it has good DPS for like an enemy that gets too close, like a berserker or something. Going in with the grenade pistol, I'm going to put it like solid A+. The only reason I don't necessarily want to put it any higher is it's sometimes pretty hard to use versus fabricators. I'll be honest, I see a lot of people struggle with it. Although I might not have that much issue, I can't deny the fact that a lot of people tend to have issue with the grenade pistol on fabricators. It is noticeable how many people I notice just like wasting half their reserves trying to kill it, and maybe not knowing that they can shoot through the door. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's sometimes apparent that like it's not the most user-friendly weapon against those. It's much easier to shoot it into a bug hole than a fabricator's vent. And it's understandable, right? Because you can even shoot it into the vent, but because of the wrong angle, right, it won't explode close enough to the point at which it blows up the fabricator. So I'm gonna put it A+. It's a fantastic sidearm, regardless, even if you want to put it in S tier. I do bring it a lot myself. It's great. It opens up your loadouts immensely. Instead of having to take like the Eruptor or the Crossbow, you can bring the grenade pistol and like the AMR, and it works really well. Bushwhacker coming next. Really pleasantly surprised with how well it works, but because it's a shotgun and it's not always super useful because of how many shots you can use it on, I struggle with this one because one part of me wants to put it right next to the Punisher because it's basically like a baby Punisher. But the other side of it is that because of its ammo economy and because you only get 3 shots and because it seems to be less accurate than the Punisher, it has a harder time dealing with Devastators. It's rather good against Devastators, but I still think that it needs a little bit more accuracy, or you need to be really close to make it as good as the Punisher. For those who don't know, it essentially shoots what the Punisher does as far as damage, but it doesn't seem to be as accurate, at least from my testing and what I've seen through gameplay. I do enjoy it. It's really fun against like berserkers that are rushing you, and like tier 1 bots, you can kind of just aim in their general direction. They fall over because of it. But versus Devastators, I want a little bit more precision, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of you in the comments tell me that you would put it in the A tier. I don't blame you. I think it's rather fun, and in the right hands, if you can get close enough, I think it'd be very, very powerful. Something that I do think deserves to be an A tier, at least A- or thereabouts, A- would be the Verdict. I really enjoy using the Verdict in bot missions. It's a very fun weapon, and like we were talking about earlier, if you have any amount of forward momentum or dive, you can one-tap a Devastator in the head, which is really cool information. This was found out because of the Charger tech, where if you have forward momentum, you can one-tap a Charger's leg, a Behemoth Charger's leg with an AT weapon. Very cool information, and it actually has an actual weapon justification as well with the Verdict. So do recommend trying that out. The small magazine and decent recoil stops it from kind of going even higher, but super fun weapon to use. It's like it's just a really good weapon. It's kind of where the Peacemaker kind of needs to be closer to, in my opinion. Senator, I'm gonna put it right up next there to the A+. It's fantastic sidearm. It's great. I highly recommend checking it out with the speed loader. The only reason I can't put it in S tier is that I feel like it needs better sights and a better ammo economy. It still has a pretty shite ammo economy at the moment, and I hope that it gets some kind of scope. I would love to see like a small 2x on it or something along those lines, or maybe a variant of this Senator in the future that has like a longer barrel with more damage and then a sight on it. That would kind of be my dream Senator for bots, just because I feel like I have to be quite close to be, you know, reliably getting those one taps, because the sights are just, what is it? It's like a red dot, but like not very useful red dot. Going into the grenades, we have the G6 frag. It's okay. It's basically an acceptable grenade in many respects. It has decent AoE, but honestly, it it just deserves to be down there in C tier. It needs to do more upfront damage, and very rarely will it actually kill a Devastator outright. It has decent AoE potential, but you know, why not just bring an impact? Why not just bring a regular high explosive grenade? I just cannot recommend. Smoke grenade is like a middle B. It just doesn't have enough radius. If they buffed up the smoke grenade to like maybe have 3 plumes of smoke in like a triangle formation, or just buffed up the circle that, or the radius of the smoke, it would be a hell of a lot more useful. It's just right now I throw it at my feet or like towards some enemies, and it barely blocks off their line of sight, to the point where like I don't even think it really does much. It's nice against like protecting certain like hell bombs and stuff like that. I've noticed people use it, and it's fairly good at it, or throwing a grenade at your feet and hoping that they're less accurate when hitting you. But in the grand scheme of things, I think I would much rather use like other grenades. Incendiary impact, I think, is like a solid like A- pick. It's fairly good versus bots, but I would rather have the more of an upfront damage rather than relying so much on like the damage over time component of it. Between the incendiary impact and just regular impact, I would much rather use the impact. That being said, I'm going to put the impact right up there in S tier. I don't think there's any surprise that it deserves to be right up there. When a bot drop comes in, you'll see me sitting right where they're landing, throwing 2 of these or 1 of these, and just watching them die. It's also fairly good against a Hulk. You can throw it between the legs of a Hulk, and in like between 2 and 3, depending on how good and what kind of terrain is below the Hulk. You can kill it fairly well by blowing up its radiator. So solid pick. You have the incendiary grenade going into B. I definitely would bring it over smoke in most situations, but I could see where smoke can be useful. I'll say that. The incendiary grenade just doesn't get utilized nearly as much, especially if you really want fire in a bot mission. I think you would just bring the incendiary breaker or the incendiary impact, 2 that are just straight up better. High explosive grenade, I think, is a solid option and pick for bots. It's not as good as the impact, just because the immediacy of the impact is very useful and is better at like putting the grenade where you need it and want it. The high explosive does have like one nice thing, is that you can throw it under the feet of a bunch of devastators, especially heavy devastators, and it will do more reliable damage. That is one thing the high explosive has, is that the shield of the heavy devastator can sometimes help them survive impact grenades. So do keep that in mind. Another S tier grenade that, you know, will probably be like interchangeable with the impact for many is the stun grenade. The stun grenade is incredibly good when paired with a lot of support weapons and just giving you breathing room versus devastators or Hawks. I think we've all been in a situation where a bot drop comes in and it lands right at your feet and you're like, oh shit. The stun grenade is fantastic for dealing with those situations and just creating space. Impact is fairly good for it too, but you know, can you create enough distance between you and that dropship before they start shooting at you and you can get an impact off? You know, it kind of depends on the player. I think some people will really like the impact, some people will like the stuns. It kind of depends on play style and maybe even what weapon you're using. Because like people who use the laser cannon, the stun grenades are better for. But someone who uses the auto cannon, you might not need the stun grenades to hit that eye pretty accurately, depending on how good you are. So the impacts become like your backup major AoE, you know, on a whim. Thermites, I think, are like a solid like A, I guess. They're a little inconsistent, as thermites are, and I don't think they're really in a great spot overall. But one nice thing that they do have is they can take out hulks from the front. It's a 2 to 3 thermite kind of situation. 2 to the front faceplate can a lot of the time take out a hulk. I do recommend kind of throwing one, waiting a couple seconds, throw another, because if you don't know, the thermite's damage over time doesn't seem to stack with each other. So you get into a situation where if you throw 2 really close back to back, you get a situation where you actually don't kill the hulk with the thermite, and you might need a third one to kill it. But if you have enough patience, throwing one, waiting a second or two, then throwing another is a more reliable way to get that extra damage. So thermites are not terrible, but they're also not great. They're situational. They're situational. One nice thing, though, is if you throw a thermite very accurately at a factory strider's turret up top, it will kill it in 1. It might have been 2, but I'm pretty sure it was 1 thermite. I don't have my notes on me right now, but I'm pretty sure it was 1, which is not bad. Not bad. Throwing knife, I don't think any debate has to be said for throwing knife. It's a meme weapon for bots. It's very rewarding when you get that one tap, but I just don't see it happening very often, especially since the knife doesn't go exactly where you're aiming. It's a little bit offset because of the camera, I believe. And it doesn't quite have enough penetration to do like a cool thing, like take out a Hulk in the eye. You technically can kill a tank with it, but like, why would you? It's a meme weapon, let's be honest. It's for the people that want to have like some funny kills, or, you know, feel like a badass as you go through a compound throwing knives at like individual tier 1 bots. Or I have seen evidence that it is a fairly good stealth weapon, but I've also seen evidence where it alerts the entire patrol when you kill one of the enemies. Not sure what's going on there, if it's supposed to be more of a support weapon or not, but yeah. Anyways, Luna's still here. She's purring in my arms. We're going to call it here. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more. We're going to be doing many more of these. I've been talking about possibly doing an armor tier list, or at least doing an armor video where I talk about different armors I recommend for bugs or bots. Also, I've been thinking about doing a booster video and talking about like the realistic situations on like which ones I recommend, which ones I don't, and which situations certain boosters are better in. So let me know if you guys are interested in those. For me and Luna, have a fantastic day, and drop by the stream. Come talk to me about the video and drop a comment down below. Bye, buddy. Much love. Luna is tuckered out from the tier list video. Such a good girl.